Hey guys, what's up? It's Heather with the Moscow, and today this is going to be part 2 of our Lazy Girl Gardening, Taking the Maintenance Out of Gardening series. If you're new here, my name is Heather, and this is the Moscow, where we're learning to garden together and trying things out even when conditions aren't perfect. We live in East Tennessee, garden in Zone 7B, and we live in the woods, and it's fantastic. And I love to garden, but sometimes it can be very time consuming. I have a very busy life. I work over full-time hours at a job. I have 2 kids, and I just don't have as much time as I'd like for gardening. So when I'm gardening, I need to find ways to make it completely approachable for myself and realistic for the time that I have. And these are the things that I have gone through over the years and have really helped me to keep my garden kind of 80% tidy all the time. I talked about in the first video how a lot of times time management is part of the thing. So taking 10 to 15 minutes per day versus having an hour to do something. And then your garden is 80% put together all the time. I'm over here in front of my limelight hydrangeas. I'm trying to hold this closer to my face because the last couple videos I've had a hard time. These aren't limelights, Incrediballs. I've had a hard time with the audio, so hopefully this helps make it a little better. But in that video, in the first one, we went over some time management and tool aspects as to taking the maintenance out of your garden and getting back to the things in gardening you love, so having the right tool for the job, taking a daily 10 to 15 minutes versus trying to take 3 or 4 hours a week. Today, we're going to focus more on your plant choices and the kind of plants that make things better for you and how to arrange them in a way that takes a lot of the maintenance out. Our first point is going to be the biggest part of maintaining a garden that nobody likes is weeding. Let's be honest. Weeding can be very gratifying, but it can also be time consuming. And if it's to a level where you can maintenance it, great. But if you get to a level where you can't, then you got a problem on your hands. So how do you cut down on the maintenance of weeds? Well, we've talked about making sure that you're choosing materials that make weeding easy for you and having the right tool for the job. But sometimes it's choosing the right plant, and this is what I mean by that. 2 strategies for cutting down on weeds and maintenance in general in your garden. First one's going to be ground covers. So let's go take a look. So here is an area that was getting a ton of weeds, and I was constantly having to pull these weeds, and it was a problem. So what I did was start this lamb's ear. Now, grant you, I need to divide it and spread it out. But once this bed is covered with lamb's ear, we won't need to mulch it anymore, which will save us money and save us the time of having to mulch it, but also it's going to suppress the weeds. They're going to choke out the weeds. So ground covers. Covering all available ground with a plant so that you don't have weeds growing. Lamb's ear is a good option. I'll show you another one I'm working on. And here's another spot where I've got some lamb's ear. Now these, I just took a couple cuttings from up there and put a couple in here, and they're starting to spread out. And we'll do that again. We'll cut them again. We'll spread them out some more. Also, I like the blue color that they add. As you know, I like to do chartreuse, blue, red, and green in all of my beds. Now, this is not going to be very impressive, but this is Creeping Jenny. Now, Creeping Jenny can be a little extra, and I'm a little worried about that. But I barely planted this in the ground, and I'm hoping that it gives me the chartreuse to cover all this area and to keep from having weeds. We want to focus on things that are going to cover the ground for us, but not be too invasive, not be too much maintenance to keep under control, because that kind of defeats the purpose. I never have that problem with the lamb's ear. I got to watch out for that on the Creeping Jenny. But another list of ground covers you can use, there's Lamium, you can use Carexes as a ground cover, Ajuga. There's all kind of ground covers if you do a search to help you cover those spaces, especially like the front of beds. You don't want anything very tall that's going to suppress the weeds for you. Then you're not going to need to mulch. If you've got ground covers over everything, you're not going to need to mulch anything. And that will take a ton. If you didn't have to mulch anything and you didn't have to mulch very much and you didn't have to weed very much, how much of your maintenance would be gone? Just saying. The next category of plants that aren't ground covers but suppress the weeds are this kind of thing. Planting in mass to cover the ground. Now, I like to plant in mass because I think it looks good. As a statement, I think it looks fantastic. I don't in many places plant a thing here and a thing there. That other bed I do, but as a general rule, I like to plant in masses. The benefit here is there's no weeds growing here. I used to have to weed this bed all the time. There's no weeds growing here. I don't have to weed it at all. It takes care of it. And if there's a weed growing in there, I wouldn't know because I can't see them. And it looks fantastic. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a ground cover to provide you that function. So it could just be a mass of plants or dotted plants, but planted close enough together that things aren't growing between them. So filling up beds and getting some ground covers in there, that's going to cut down on a lot of your weeding maintenance in your beds. So that's the first one today, is planting in a way to keep the weeds down, ground covers, and planting close. The tighter you plant, you want to plant so things can grow, obviously, but you want to plant it thick enough that things aren't needing to be weeded all the stinking time. And that's why this is here. The second tip for today is going to be planting things that aren't divas. Now, what do I mean by that? Some plants require deadheading and maintenance and lots of fertilizer and are very prone to disease. I'm looking at you, roses. And some plants you stick in the ground and you don't have to worry about them. So these here are incredible hydrangeas. And I'm right here because this is a problem solved for me right here. I should have deadheaded them and probably pruned them, but for the most part, I fertilize them in the spring. They don't need anything else from me. Now, I will also say, this especially applies to some of your annuals. So, Supertunia Vista Jazzberry. So, your Supertunias. I love my Supertunia Vista Jazzberry. I put in a drift of these every year. They are gorgeous. They are heavy feeders. So, I need to come back in with fertilizer, ideally every week for these guys. They need water. They're pretty water hungry. And they don't need deadheading, so that's nice. But I do have to stay on top of fertilizing them. And fertilizing them here isn't a problem. I find that I will fill up cans and fertilize them there. Previously, though, I've had Supertunias in multiple places in my yard, and I find that I just won't fertilize multiple places in my yard like that. It takes me 10 minutes to fertilize these. It takes me 30 minutes if they're all over the yard. So when I'm choosing annuals for my yard, I will go for begonias and impatiens and things that just don't require as much from me. If they get a little less water, it's okay. They don't need any fertilizer. They grow, they bloom, they thrive. They don't need any deadheading. So for my annuals, I often go with begonias. The other thing about begonias, they'll grow in lighter shade. So if you don't have your light conditions quite right, you're okay. Don't have to worry about it. So I've got these impatiens here and these begonias, sweet potato vine. Begonias haven't taken off quite yet nearly as much as the impatiens, but it looks great. I don't have to fertilize it. It's on drip tubing. I just put it in the container and I'm done. And now I've saved myself 30 minutes every single week just by picking a plant that isn't a diva, doesn't require as much from me. You've got a Coleus in here. These things don't need deadheading. They just aren't divas. So when you're picking your annuals, start thinking about that. Those Supertunias are gorgeous. I love them. And I love them enough to put them certain places and enjoy them. But for my other annuals, a lot of times I'll go with begonias or sun patiens or impatiens, things that just don't need as much fertilizer for me. Because if I knock out that fertilizer, again, you have to think about how you're doing your garden. Look around and say, what task takes me the most? What task do I put off the most because it's just too much work? Can I get a tool to make that easier? Or maybe next year I need to pick a plant that doesn't require that and substitute something else for it. Other plants that I have found in the past to be divas, and I don't deal with them as much anymore, roses. I'm just not going to have roses. For the amount of blooms you get, you got to spray them to within an inch of their life. For the amount of bugs that eat them, it's just not worth it to me. They just are disease-prone little guys, and they don't produce enough or give enough to me for me to want to spray them every single week for the whole year. Now, that tip is going to kind of lean into this next tip. And that is choosing the right plant for the right place. Now, some people might say, Heather, that's pretty much all of gardening. And I wouldn't disagree with you. Now, the easiest route to go is to pick things that do well, pretty well anywhere. And that would be like your begonias or your Coleus. All of these things are going to do well anywhere that you put them. As long as you're giving them a decent amount of water, the sun doesn't matter as much to them. But we're back in front of these hydrangeas, A, because I think they're beautiful, and B, because they solve a problem for me. See, when I first moved in here, we had this bank of hostas here, and it looked really beautiful in May. They would be these full, beautiful blue-green hostas, and they looked great. And then within a month after May, June came along, got really hot here. And this doesn't get a whole bunch of sun, but it got enough to make the hostas burn. They would bleach out and they would burn, and I was taking off the old leaves, and they would get slug damage, and I was constantly grooming these things, and then they would get thin enough that the weeds could peek through. It was a lot of maintenance. So I decided we'll put in some incredible hydrangeas. Incredible hydrangeas, again, are going to get big enough, and they like enough sun to bloom. They can handle that much sun, and they can handle the fact that it gets kind of a little bit of shade. So this is the right plant for the right place. They look great here. They can kind of spread out and do their thing here. Even when they flop over, they look great. And they don't require anything from me. It's putting the right plant in the right place. This tree over here, it was up in that bed with a sister tree on the other end of that bed. The problem with that was one side gets full afternoon sun, although both sides get mostly shade for the better part of the morning part of the day. The other side didn't get any sun, and so its sister tree died. So I moved it over here where, again, it gets a little bit of sun, but not too much, and it's happier and healthier. Now I don't have to do anything with it. Now you might be asking, what did you do with these hostas? Well, let's go look. I dug up those hostas and I put them in a bed that was always in the shade. And I planted them in mass in that bed in an effort to make sure that it would cover the ground, act as some ground cover, and suppress the weeds. And it's now part of the way there. We've got a good bit of hosta in here. They're starting to grow together, and while there's weeds in between them still, they eventually will get big enough where that's not a problem. They're just babies right now. So I do still have to weed this, need to weed it right now. But they're getting bigger and they're growing. They're not on drip. They like the light here. They do get some overspray from the sprinklers. But it's the right plant for the right place. These would bleach out in the other bed over here. They don't do that. They stay their nice green chartreuse. There's a different mixture of them in here. Is the right plant for the right place. And that means doesn't need any maintenance. How many times have we all said, you know what, I want this plant, but I don't think I have the right spot for it. But if I just baby it along, maybe I can get it to grow there. You're setting yourself up for a lot of maintenance in saying, if I just baby it along, maybe I can get it there. Maybe you can, and maybe it's worth it. But you need to really assess how much time you are going to spend every single week trying to maintenance that thing you're babying. And is there an alternative for it that would be very similar, but would fit better in the spot based on care that you're looking at. So again, to recap, one way that you really need when you're planting and designing what you want in your beds, you need to be honest with yourself about the maintenance involved and about the conditions you're actually dealing with. Now, some of Right Plant, Right Place is trial and error. I've put places that I thought would do great there, that I thought would be bulletproof, and they weren't. The things died. And that's okay. That's part of gardening. But when you're thinking about putting something in or what you're going to put where, you need to be thinking about these things so that you can make sure that you're making decisions that keep that garden low maintenance for you. And then the tasks that you're willing to dedicate your time and energy to, getting the right tools and right materials to make sure that those are doable for you. So again, you want to try your best to plant things thick enough that weeds aren't growing through, that you're not having to mulch it all the time, that things aren't washing out, and use those ground covers where you need to cover that area. And you need to pick low maintenance plants in a lot of places so that you can limit your high maintenance plants to areas that it's really impactful and really important for you so that you can keep your time invested where it's most important to you. And finally, you need to pick the right plant in the right place to make sure that you're not doing unnecessarily hard maintenance to try to get a plant to flourish somewhere where it's just not meant to. These are the things that are going to keep the maintenance to a reasonable level for you and get back in your garden so that you can enjoy doing the things that you enjoy. Maybe it's replacing a plant with the right plant in the right place, or you found out something wasn't growing there that you thought it would. Whatever the case may be. But these are the things in the planting decisions that are going to be very important when you're designing a garden and deciding where things go, into determining what kind of maintenance you're going to be doing, and is it going to be enough maintenance that you can't do it. Because there's no point in putting in $1,000 in plants and then finding out that you can't maintenance them and they look like crap. We want to make sure that we're spending our time in our garden wisely and dedicating it to the right things that we need. So that all being said, please comment below if you have any other tips to get rid of maintenance in the garden. If there's certain plants for you that are bulletproof plants that just don't require anything from you, please comment those so other people can know what they are, especially if you're in a different area than I am. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.